Hey gang, we are at Calvary Cemetery here in Evanston. It's kind of a sleety, cold November day. And we're by the mausoleums. But we're going to take a walk a little bit to the west here to visit the grave of a little girl named Janet Wilkinson. I want to thank one of our viewers, Antoinette B., for suggesting this story. I hadn't heard about it. And I just heard about it yesterday, so this has moved to the top of my list. It is a story back from 1919, and it actually is a story that reminds me of the very first story that I did here on YouTube, on my channel, about little Aliska Perubek, who was murdered back then, similar time. Except in this story, the killer was caught. That's right. Now, it was a warm summer day on that Tuesday. It was in July of 1919. And it was on the near north side of Chicago. We're on the very far north shore, just outside Chicago. But on the north side, right downtown there, and it was at 9 a.m., there's a little 5-year-old girl named Janet Wilkinson, and she went to the playground there. Now, she hadn't been there before, so they registered her in. And she didn't go there alone. She was with two of her little friends. And Janet did leave, though, by herself at around noon. And she was last seen talking to this man on the street corner. A man whose name would turn out to be Thomas Fitzgerald. Janet never came home. Now, they searched and searched for her, and they quickly zeroed in on this guy, this Thomas Fitzgerald. Why did they zero in on him? Well, he was last seen talking to her by witnesses, and when they started grilling him, it turned out that, well, a couple of years, or I think it was 17 years before, he was arrested and served a couple of months in jail for larceny. It was not too long before this that he was arrested for actually trying to do nefarious things with little Janet and her sister. He had lured them into his apartment to offer them candy. And they said when they came in, the older sister, all they saw was comic books. The funnies, that's what they call it, the funnies. And they were in the parlor, and he had some kind of boarder, a woman, and she happened to walk in on them. He was messing around. And he said something to the effect of, "How do you like my little girls? My little girls." And that's when the girls ran out. So last seen with him, and what happens? Well, the police zero in. And they start grilling him. 8-hour interrogation. 8 hours under the hot light. 8 hours no food and water. Well, he finally broke down. He finally broke down and he admitted it. He said, "I did it." And he actually told the story, the chilling story of what he did. He said, "I was sitting in the window at 10 minutes after 12 Tuesday when I saw little Janet coming towards the building." Now, he was a janitor at this building. He said, "When she came up the steps to the landing at my doorway, I said, 'Dolly, would you like some candy?'" That's what he called her, Dolly. He said she hesitated. He said, "So I picked her up in my arms and I carried her into my apartment." but she started to scream. Before I knew it or realized what I was doing, I grabbed her by the throat and choked her to death. Now, I didn't know what to do. I had to get dressed. At the time of this, I was in my bathrobe. So I took little Janet's body in my arms, going down the front stairs to the basement, and it is where I buried it, under a pile of coal. And that's right, he used the words it. I buried it under a pile of coal. So, let's go, take us there, okay. So, really creepy, they go there to the basement like a dungeon. And there is the furnace. And he says, it's there. And they look, of course they can't see anything, and it's between the flue pipe going up and the wall. And the detective says, do you want to take her out? And he goes, oh yes, I will. In other words, dig her out. But he stood there just like shaking. His hands wouldn't move. So, they dug her out. And there, they found her body. And they did notice, it was dark with coal, and they did notice that he had beaten her. In fact, it looked like he had punched her. Her teeth were loose, her face was smashed, of course swollen and discolored and blackened with that coal dust. Well, they made Thomas stand there and watch the entire time as he squirmed and sweated. Well, when the news got out, 2,000 people gathered, and they were shouting, lynch him, hang him, string him up. And the police had to get him out of there. And that's what they did. As one could expect, soon after this murderer would deny his guilt. I didn't do it. But he was found guilty. And he was sentenced to death. And he faced the hangman. And there he stood on the scaffold. And when they asked him, do you have any last words? He said, no, thank you. Very politely. The shroud was tied, the white cap of the head was fixed, and the jailer stepped off the platform. And next there was a crash, and that man was swinging to his eternity. They cut the body down 16 minutes later, and he was gone. Justice for Janet. And these are the graves. There are 4 stones here of the family I see. I believe this is the father, John. So he passed in 1923. What's that, 4 years later? All right. There's a Bernice Healy, passed in 1980. Not sure, maybe maiden name Wilkinson. Can't really see. Looks like 1903. Now this stone here is someone else, but I am pretty sure one of these 2 stones is Janet. All right, this is Kathy Wilkinson, who passed in 1967, born in 1879. So this has to be little Janet. Yes. (1912) to 1919. Poor little Janet. Poor little Janet. Brought her a flower. Well, that's the story. And there was justice served, as many times not, but there's always justice served in the afterlife, we hope. Janet Wilkinson, rest in peace. Rest in peace.